So the objectives, as I said, are to understand the simple strategies and techniques to be able to answer or meet your assessment criteria or your marking guide within your assessment task instructions. Firstly, a presentation should only contain the information on the nominated topic, so try to ensure that you don't vary outside the topic and start wandering unless it's relevant to prove a point about the content that you're trying to make. One of the things we've found with the assessment items so far is that people are going over time, and if you're ever presenting to a board or to an audience where you've got a very constrained time restriction, you need to get used to the fact that you're doing presentations within a time restriction and you should try and be able to meet that. We will give you prompts throughout the course of your presentation, depending on whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. You need to make sure that your assessment task instruction is your very best friend, and that you know exactly what it is that you've got to undertake and prove as evidence as part of your assignment. So in the marking guide you will see exactly what it is that you're going to be marked on, but in the earlier part of the assessment you should be looking at what you've got to prepare and the support materials that you've got to provide as part of your presentation. Now the content, I've seen people who present a really fancy presentation and they're reading from a piece of paper and the two don't match. Now, if you can, it's better to present without using a support item like the printed copy, but that's okay if you need to be able to do that. But the best presentation is a presentation where the text on the screen is not elongated, you don't have a lot of text there, there's a few words, and it prompts the presenter to talk about the topic that they're very knowledgeable with. So they don't need to be able to read from the screen or just go through what's there. They're actually supplementing the information that's on the screen because they know so thoroughly what it is that they're talking about. And because they know so much of what they're talking about, they're able to flow through from the beginning of the presentation to the end, and it all ties in together. It doesn't seem disjointed and they're just waiting to find out what the next slide says. It's actually a story that they're telling through the presentation and being able to cover the topics that they need to be able to cover. And as I said, you don't want PowerPoint slides full of text. You want short, succinct notes that actually prompt you to talk about what it is that you know that you've got to cover. Now sometimes that might be text, sometimes it might be images. You might have a picture or a logo or something like that and says, oh, okay, so what I'm going to talk is about our suppliers, and these are the suppliers, and you've got the brands of the supplier names up there. When you get marked and you're providing your printed copy of your presentation, obviously it's better if they can see from an auditing point of view that they can see the topics that you're talking about, but at the end of the day we mark that you've actually proven your knowledge or provided evidence of the topics rather than having to just have them printed on a piece of paper. So what you talk about is relevant as well. Now, as I say, presentations should not have slides that are just full of text. It's just, you become redundant because everyone's just reading the slide rather than listening to what you're saying. If you find that people are looking at the slide, as I said to you, you can actually black out the screen, and you can do this on the keyboard in PowerPoint. So what people do is they go, oh, okay. And some people say you should never have a blank screen, but what it does is it brings the focus back onto you. And of course you shouldn't go over time, and of course you don't want to be able to spend a long time on a simple topic. It might be of interest to you, but it's got to be of interest to the audience. So you're not presenting what you know, you've got to present what you know the audience needs. And in this case what the audience needs is proof of the evidence that's in the assessment task instructions. With your assignments you obviously have a time limit. Most of them are either 5 or 10 minutes. And of course you need to be able to ensure that you are covering the assessment task instruction information at the appropriate level, so that if you are presenting from a project manager's point of view, perhaps in the diploma level, that you represent yourself in that capacity, or if you are working on the certificate 4, that you are presenting it to show that you are involved in the process as part of the project team. So make sure your presentation has the appropriate focus so that you're presenting what is required of you from the assessment task instructions, not just what you know. Must cover content from the marking guide. So as I said, your assessment task instructions should be your best friend, and it's not only the marking guide, it's all the other information that's in there as well. The best way to think of it is you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you've told them. So at the beginning of this presentation I did an objectives. So you understood what the objectives of this presentation is. Then I go through the detail, and at the end of it I'll do a summary. If you watch the news, they do exactly the same thing. They do headlines, headlines, headlines. They advertise that, and then when they get to the detail, they provide all the gory gossip and the detail, and at the end of it they do a summary. Okay, so it's the best way of doing it if you have the time to be able to do that. So some suggestions around how you create the content for your presentation is to identify the content you need to cover. So for example, when you were doing the scope presentation, you would normally have a slide that would cover each one of the major headings in the scope document. So therefore you could talk about how you've addressed that and how you came up with the information behind it being a work breakdown structure or something like that. Now, there might be 10 headings, but you actually only want to do usually about one slide per 1 minute or 2 minutes of time that you have. So you don't want to create 15 slides for the sheer sake of it. There you go. So usually one slide per 1 or 2 minutes is where you'll get, because you can't just read from the slide, you've actually got to talk about what it is that you're trying to cover. So as I say, you need to time and be aware of the time that you're actually spending on each slide and how long it's going to go on for, and obviously match the content to the marking guide. Now, your prompts can be words, as I said, but they can be images or whatever you want to make, so that you can talk about the topics that you want to talk about or that you need to cover. So at the end of the day, as you were saying, you need to rehearse it. If you're not familiar with doing presentations, then join Toastmasters. They are one of the best ways of getting on your feet in front of people and learning to do that, so that you lose the fear of doing presentations if that's something you struggle with. They also help you talk knowledgeably and confidently about the topics that you're going to cover, no matter whether it's changing a light bulb or whether it's about your assignment. So practice it. As I was saying, I practice when I'm in the car. I know the things I've got to talk about, and I'll just be speaking out loud about what I'm going to say. And if anyone knew what I was saying, luckily they can think I'm talking on the phone nowadays, because they don't think I'm a total fruitcake. But rehearse it, don't wing it. Do the presentation in front of colleagues, peers, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, whoever you can get to sit down and watch it. Because if that person doesn't understand what you're talking about, then it means that you're not getting the message across. So rehearse it, don't wing it. Now, if you're doing a group assignment, you've got to make sure that you've allocated who's going to talk about what. So in the course of the presentation, you're not saying, oh no, you do this, and no, you do that. Make sure that you've got scheduled how you're going to go about allocating the slide discussion. You don't have the time, when you're doing the presentations, to go through infinite detail. You don't have the time to talk about the stuff in the work breakdown structure right down to the detail. So you would summarize it, and then you would attach the support document. So you would say something to the effect of, as per the work breakdown structure document that you've been provided, the summary of the activities is X, Y, and Z, and these are the resources allocated to it. You don't go through the real micro detail. So when we're talking about the perspective, this is one of the things a lot of people have asked me questions about. If you are doing this from a diploma level, you want to make sure that you haven't got your hands on the tools so much, you're actually moving up a level. So you're talking about how you're managing your team. If you are in the Cert 4 level, you're actually talking, your presentation is talking about how you've achieved it as part of the team rather than managing it. If you're talking about a project manager's perspective, the sorts of things that you will be saying is, my team has done this, I have coordinated that, we've ensured as a team that we've conducted this analysis and we've achieved that, and we've discussed this with these stakeholders, how are we going about it. One of my team members, or I ensured my team members achieved or accomplished this and this and this. So that's the sort of terminology that you would be putting across verbally as part of the presentation, to make sure that you're talking about how you've actually managed the project as opposed to you doing the work. So in summary, you plan the presentation for both content and for time. You know your content, so you can talk about it fluently and you can go through with flow from slide to slide. You keep to the time. You make sure you're fluent and knowledgeable. You don't read from the screen, and you have the right perspective, so you're talking about it from either doing the work or managing the work being done.